sturdy defensive Pokemon that are difficult to eliminate are nicknamed walls by the competitive singles community. These are Pokemon with high defensive stats, reliable forms of healing, and usually utility or status moves that help out your team. They're like a wall, blocking the enemy's attackers from getting through. Walls are a fundamental part of competitive Pokemon, and are a common way to handle enemy offensive threats. But some Pokemon specialize in taking down these walls. These Pokemon might not be as fast or varied as other attackers, but they have high base power attacks or powerful boosts, providing them with that damage output to break through those defensive walls, outpace their healing, and open things up for your team. These are Wallbreakers, and their job is to punish greedy teams that rely too heavily on a defensive plan. Wallbreakers have a very important job, and they're a great tool to consider using when building a team of your own. Let's take a look at different examples of Wallbreakers in every single generation of competitive singles, and how this archetype of Pokemon has changed over the years, along with the mechanics of each generation. If I can reach the milestone of 70,000 subscribers, I will personally hunt down and defeat the notorious Pokemon criminal Iron Mugulus for good. Thank you. In Generation 1 OU, Wallbreakers are a bit different, because many of the mechanics that enhance damage output in later generations don't exist yet. There's no held items, there's no abilities, and there's also a limited selection of moves to choose from, but Wallbreakers do still exist in some forms, and the unique mechanics of Generation 1 also create some pretty unique choices. Hyper Beam is the obvious ultimate wall-breaking move. This is a massive 150 power, normal type attack, and in Generation 1 there's a glitch. If you KO an enemy Pokemon with Hyper Beam, it doesn't need to recharge like it usually does. Usually you're stuck there recharging after using Hyper Beam, but in Generation 1 Hyper Beam is extremely powerful. The game centers around it in fact. The premier abuser of Hyper Beam is of course Tauros, who deals big damage with a stab boosted high base power attack. It doesn't immediately apply impossible to switch into pressure upon coming in. You actually have to be very careful when you use Tauros. If it gets paralyzed or it uses Hyper Beam in the wrong situation, it can be KO'd. A lot of Pokemon can resist Hyper Beam pretty easily, and it's not exactly spammable. I would still count this though. It does break walls. It might need some setup to do so. It might need to do it in the late game when things are a bit damaged, but Hyper Beam does threaten that huge damage to KO Chansey and Snorlax and other such fellows. Snorlax has similar wall breaking potential and an even higher attack stat than Tauros does. It is slower of course, but that doesn't change the fact that it poses a huge threat to walls. It's a bit of a wall in itself with its monstrous defensive stats, but it's also a damn offensive beast with a huge amount of damage output. Another Pokemon that I would describe as a wall breaker, it might not seem like one at first, but Alakazam. This Pokemon in Gen 1 has a massive special stat, which is special attack and special defense combined if you didn't know. 135. It's almost legendary level. Alakazam is excellent. Psychic has a respectable base power of 90, but more notably is this 33% chance to lower the target's special. So that's a really high chance. And Alakazam can often even 1v1 Chansey, the premier special wall of Gen 1 OU, because of this drop chance. Not only the drop chance, but crit chance benefits Alakazam. In Gen 1, crit chance is actually based on the speed stat. The higher your base speed compared to the enemy, the higher your crit chance, and Alakazam is extremely speedy. Look at it. Jolteon is another Pokemon that can abuse the crit chance mechanic to break through Chansey thanks to its enormous 130 base speed, and respectable 110 special is also useful. Now this is a weird one. This Pokemon doesn't function much like other wall breakers in the series, but I would say Victreebel is a bit of a wall breaker. It utilizes Wrap, which in Gen 1 actually completely immobilizes the target, preventing it from acting, like a 100% flinch chance almost. With that and Swords Dance and Hyper Beam, you can bring things into range of your Hyper Beam, boost up and break through Chansey, Snorlax, Pokemon like that. The defensive core of the enemy's team. You also have Razor Leaf to threaten Cloyster and Rhydon, which other normal types that use Hyper Beam to break through walls can't do as effectively. They're not very good against Rhydon and Cloyster, but Victreebel has this up its sleeve. And I do want to give a shout out to Machamp. Not a very popular or successful Pokemon usually. I think it's a little underrated, but you know, not a central Pokemon in the meta. But it is a wall breaker in the traditional sense. It's got a high attack stat, high base power moves, and it threatens, you know, the most popular defensive Pokemon in this metagame, Chansey and Snorlax. Low Kick has that flinch chance to rack up damage, put them in Hyper Beam range, and disrupt them a little bit. Body Slam can spread paralysis. Fighting Stab comes in handy, normal types are everywhere. And one final shout out for Generation 1 Persian. a fringe choice, but it's a bit like Tauros Light. Has lower attack, higher speed though, and it has Slash, which has bonus critical hit chance. Alongside its high speed, can actually break through walls with crit damage pretty well. Also has Hyper Beam. Bubble Beam, which is your best bet against Rhydon. Actually quite useful, to be honest. Rhydon is a common check to normal types. This is a pretty good Pokemon if you want a second Tauros, basically. That's a bit faster, gets crits, lower attack stat. Very similar role to Tauros. In Generation 2, a significant new mechanic was introduced in the form of held items. This didn't have much of an impact on most Wallbreakers because Choice Band, Life Orb, offensive items like that would come out later in the series. There weren't that many held items in Gen 2, but one of the biggest additions to a Wallbreaker was Thick Club, the item exclusive to Marowak, which doubles its attack stat. This is an excellent item that turns Marowak into a fantastic Wallbreaker. After a Swords Dance, Earthquake can one-hit KO Snorlax, the most common and prominent defensive Pokemon in Gen 2. It's even better than it was in Gen 1. This coverage threatens much of the metagame. Rock Slide threatens Zapdos, Earthquake, Raikou. Neutral Earthquake will chunk anything. Rock Slide complements it perfectly by threatening the flying types. One of the early examples of a classic Wallbreaker, I would say, is Marowak in Gen 2 OU. I would also give a shout out to Machamp in this generation who got significantly buffed from Gen 1 to 2. First of all, it has access to Cross Chop now, which is actually one of the strongest stab moves in the game, and off the back of this 130 base attack stat, the ability to directly threaten Snorlax with super effective high power damage. This is a huge get. Hyper Beam does not exist in the same form in Gen 2, it was nerfed, but Machamp definitely got the better end of the deal in many areas in Gen 2. It also has Curse, a new boosting move that helps you get that extra damage to break through stuff. You are slow, you're not, a fast, powerful, varied offensive threat, you're mostly using stab damage, but Machamp is absolutely one of Gen 2's most effective Wallbreakers in win conditions. I would also give a shout out to certain variants of Zapdos that lean in a more offensive direction. While the majority of Zapdos sets will run Rest and Sleep Talk and be defensive Pokemon themselves, some Zapdoses go all in on offense, with the Magnet item, which boosts electric type attacks by 10%, which is not insignificant. It does add up, that little extra damage. These sets often opt for Thunder, which has a massive base power of 120, low accuracy but 30% para chance. Zapdos is going to dish out big neutral damage to common switch-ins like Snorlax, and over the course of the game, eventually land paralysis and just break through them with sheer power. So Zapdos can be a bit of a Wallbreaker in Gen 2 with the right set. You've also got to give some respect to Snorlax. I wouldn't necessarily classify it as a Wallbreaker. It's more of a wall, but Snorlax is kind of everything in one in Gen 2 OU. It's absurdly powerful, and it does have tools like Belly Drum, the high power attack Double Edge, which has massive base power of 120, and it doesn't suffer that much from the recoil because of its high base health, and leftovers chip healing, which is not blocked by Sandstorm or anything. Sometimes Belly Drum Snorlax can even break through dedicated Snorlax checks. You just have such attack. Probably more of like a slower paced win condition than a direct Wallbreaker. It doesn't pose an immediate threat. You have to set up for such a thing, which may not qualify, but I thought I'd give a shout out to Snorlax, who is a damn threat in itself. It's hard to switch into this guy, and sometimes he does feel like a Wallbreaker. Gen 3 is where Wallbreakers and offensive mechanics really started to get a boost. Abilities were introduced, EVs were introduced, the item Choice Band was released, which really enhanced Wallbreakers. And also, new attacks came out. Notably, Focus Punch, one of the best wall-breaking tools in Gen 3. A move that punishes defensive switches. That's an ultimate wall-breaking tool. Heracross became the absolute star of wall breaking in Gen 3 with all these changes. It has an excellent stab combination with high-powered bug and fighting moves to abuse. Guts is also a perfect ability for a wall breaker. It grants an attack boost if you're statused and also provides an immunity to burns damage halving effect, which is often a really great tool to curb offensive threats. You toxic them and stall them out or burn them, halving their damage. Heracross laughs in the face of such mechanics, and it only makes him stronger. You don't even need a choice band to use Heracross as a wall breaker with its massive attack stat, massive base power moves, and ability that benefits him. But with a choice band, he's even scarier. You can straight up one-hit KO Skarmory with a predicted Focus Punch. A simple Brick Break will go a long way as well. Rock Slide the incoming Salamence or Flying type switch in, and Megahorn will just absolutely decimate dedicated physical walls like Melodic or Swampert or Suicune that usually can come in safely against physical attackers, but Heracross just has such damage output that is no longer possible. Speaking of powerful wall-breaking abilities, Medicham has perhaps the most powerful of all, Pure Power, which simply doubles a Pokemon's attack, and that includes extra stats from EVs and natures. So if you dump all of your extra stats into attack, double it, this guy can achieve absurd attack stats. And with a choice band on top, not necessary, but you can chuck it on top and just be even more powerful. This also basically one-hits Skarmory if you can predict it coming in, and then a Brick Break follow-up will take him out. A choice band will just wipe them in a single hit. Very little can come in. Rock Slide and Shadow Ball for coverage if you need it. Medicham is extremely frail though, and pretty slow compared to many other threats in the metagame, but little can match its immediate impact and power. Slacking is the first Pokemon to ever introduce a actively detrimental ability as a handicap to its absurdly powerful stat distribution. Truant is an ability that causes Slacking to skip every other turn instead of using a move, so for that reason Slacking is unreliable, a little bit inconsistent, because every time you use an attack you have to switch out and back in to use it again. On that single turn that Slacking can use a move, it is insanely powerful. It has stats that rival Legendary's 160 base attack, and Focus Punch, Shadow Ball, Return, all of these incredible options to threaten just about the entire game. This is one of the strongest wall breakers in the hands of a gamer. Even an Intimidate Salamence coming in, lowering your attack, is still gonna get demolished by this Choice Band Return. We love Slacking, folks. Epic Pokemon. Marowak can still be used as a wall breaker in a similar way to Gen 2. It got a minor buff in that department in the form of the ability Rock Head, making you immune to recoil moves, allowing the use of Double Edge for a powerful 120 base, neutral, normal type attack, which is useful. It also gained, many new allies that can paralyze enemies, making its low speed not as much of a detriment. Sometimes para-spam teams will spread paralysis as much as possible to set up for a Marowak endgame, where with thick club, Swords Dance, and near perfect physical coverage, you can clean things up from there. Not exactly super common in Gen 3, probably more common back in Gen 2, but still an option worth mentioning. And of course, you have to give some respect to Tyranitar, the king of Gen 3 OU, who can act as a wall breaker with certain sets. Not every Tyranitar set would qualify as wall breaker, but with a choice band equipped, it certainly is. Powerful stab, Rock Slide, massive attack stats, Focus Punch, of course, to chunk those rock resist switch-ins like Swampert, Flygon, and Metagross. Even Skarmory doesn't love taking a huge Focus Punch from Choice Band's Tyranitar. This is a very fun set to use, and sometimes the wall-breaking aspect of it can be unexpected. Because of Tyranitar's set variety, they might go to a Swampert, take an unexpected, enormous Focus Punch, and all of a sudden they're in big trouble as a result. We've got to talk about Metagross too, of course. Choice Band Metagross is one of the strongest wall breakers there is. It has even higher attack than Tyranitar. The ability Clear Body, which really comes in handy, granting an immunity to stat lowering. Most notably, Intimidate. Meteor Mash, 100 base power, big steel stab move that has a 20% chance to raise your attack even more. This happens more often than probably would like, and this allows Metagross to sometimes just blow through things that are supposed to check it, like Skarmory, Swampert, and Melodic. Choice Band Metagross is one of the most prominent ways to poke holes in enemy defensive cores and just break down the enemy team and pave the way for some of your other teammates to clean things up. And I think you have to bring up Choice Band Salamence as well. Not quite as effective as Choice Band Tyranitar and Metagross in my opinion, mostly because it's vulnerable to Sandstorm chip damage, but it is faster than them. It is Spike immune. It has Intimidate, which gives it some defensive merit, so it has those benefits, and Flying type Stab is really useful too. Great neutral attacking type. It can turn the tables on things that previously would have checked it, like Swampert and Melodic, taking unexpectedly huge damage from that Choice Band boost. Generation 4 is where offensive mechanics started to get turned up to 11, with the addition of notable offensive held items like Life Orb and Expert Belt, and even more notably, the introduction of extremely powerful new stab moves. Outrage, Draco Meteor, Close Combat, a wider distribution on moves like Superpower, which were previously scarce, Extreme Speed being more widely distributed. The Physical Special Split was also introduced in Gen 4, a new mechanical system where any move of any type could be both physical and special, where it was previously arbitrary based on what type it was. So now more Pokemon could abuse their primary attacking type, which was excellent for all offensive Pokemon, but especially wall breakers. And when I think of a wall breaker in Generation 4, what immediately comes to mind is Choice Band Dragonite clicking Outrage, Resistances be damned. With this huge base attack, 120 base power on Outrage, and little to no regard for anything in front of it, Dragonite can chunk through not only defensive walls, but even steel types that resist Dragon. But Outrage is not your only wall breaking tool, you also have Extreme Speed and 80 base power priority move, which is really high for a priority move. This can help you really clean up late game situations. Superpower as well, which lets you super effectively hit those pesky steel types that come in. Another move that is just massive base power, 120. They really went crazy with base power in Gen 4. And Dragonite in particular went from a pretty average Pokemon in Gen 3 to one of the strongest wall breakers and offensive threats in general in Generation 4. Another item that enhanced special attacking wall breakers was Choice Specs, which didn't exist in Gen 3. Same effect as Choice Band, but it buffs special attack instead of physical attack. And one of the best abusers of this new item is Latias. Draco Meteor has 140 base power. This guy has 110 special attack. Do the math, folks. That's more damage than you've ever seen in your life. What's also nice about this is that Blissey is not too common in Generation 4, at least not as common as it was in Gen 3. Blissey would shut down a lot of special walls, even ones with high power moves, but Latias doesn't have to worry about Blissey as much, and the common special walls of Gen 4 get pretty decimated, even if they resist Draco Meteor. They're taking a large chunk of their health and they're getting broken through. Lucario is one of the most iconic Pokemon of Gen 4. It featured in Super Smash Bros., you might remember. And with a Life Orb, this guy can go crazy. With Stab Close Combat, massive base power, pretty negligible detriment too. The guy's already frail enough. It's not like you're going to be too sad about losing defense and special defense. It's all upside really for close combat. Not to mention Extreme Speed for that incredible base power priority option. And even Swords Dance, Lucario gives defensive Pokemon in Gen 4 an extremely tough experience. It's one of the scariest things you can see if you're running a slower paced team. It can eat you up. Scizor was extremely blessed in Gen 4 and received a lot of buffs. The ability Technician being the most notable. All moves 60 power or lower have a 1.5 times power boost, which is outstanding, alongside moves like Bug Bite for big stab damage, Bullet Punch for powerful priority. And you got more options than just that. You got Super Power, that's high base power coverage, Swords Dance. Scizor can blow through enemy defense with different sets. It's got Life Orb as an option with a Swords Dance 3 attack set, but you can also go Choice Band. You got U-Turn to do big stab damage while also pivoting at the same time. That's basically free damage with momentum. Now this set is not that good in the modern Gen 4 metagame. It's fallen off quite a bit, but I gotta give respect to the first Wall Breaker set I ever used. Infernape with a Choice Band. The attack stat isn't as high as some other options, but Fire and Fighting Stab with high power, U-Turn for pivoting, and Mark Punch. I love this set, the simplicity of it. Good click for almost every situation. What's unfortunate about it is just Sandstorm chip damage can wear it down pretty easily, as can its own recoil from Flare Blitz. So it's not the most reliable guy ever. There's better wall breakers that are more popular, but I really like Choice Band Infernape. The final Pokemon I wanted to shout out was Flygon, who is another Pokemon that can abuse Choice Band and Outrage spam to great success. It's more common to run Choice Scarf on Flygon, but I really like the Choice Band set. I like that this is a Choice Band user who is immune to spikes, doesn't mind Stealth Rock, and also is immune to Sandstorm chip damage thanks to that ground type. Compared to Dragonite, the other common, Outrage spammer, you don't hit as hard, you don't have as good stats, but Dragonite doesn't live for very long usually. It gets eaten alive by Stealth Rock and Sand, and a lot of stuff really. It's not that fast too. Flygon is at least a bit speedy, and it has all these great defensive qualities, and the base power and stab damage of Outrage is often good enough to break through things, so I really like Flygon as a Choice Band user in Gen 4. In Gen 5, they definitely went a bit crazy, not only with new Pokemon designs, but permanent weather effects and other such things. Hidden abilities are also a big thing. When I think Wall Breaker in Gen 5 OU, I immediately think Kyurem Black. I don't know why this guy is even OU legal, but it's not actually that broken, it's just a ridiculous Pokemon to look at. It has 170 base attack, and if you thought that Dragonite in Gen 4 could click Outrage with no regard, you've never seen Kyurem Black. This guy can... It really, truly doesn't matter what's in front of you. You're gonna do big damage with this. It simply doesn't matter. This is one of the most ignorant Pokemon ever made. There is no Fairy type yet. Steel is your only recourse against the Dragon type, and with this much attack, the ability Terravolt too, which ignores enemy abilities, that comes in handy. There's little to be done against Kyurem Black much of the time. It's one of my favorite Pokemon to use in Gen 5 because it's so stupid. It's a hilarious Pokemon. It is, you know, limited. It has Dragon Ice typing, not the best defensively. It's slow as well. It's exploitable, but if you can get this on the field safely, something is dying basically. Something is biting the dust. That's just how it is. Generation 5 was the first time that Latios was ever allowed in OU, and that's a big deal. It has a significantly higher special attack of 130 compared to Latias, and with Choice Specs and Draco Meteor, it can do a similar thing to Latias back in Gen 4, but stronger and better. I think this is an example of a wall breaker that might be a bit too powerful. It kind of has everything. Often wall breakers sacrifice their speed or bulk in exchange for damage output, like Metacham back in Gen 3. It's not the fastest thing on Earth and it's frail, but Latios, I mean, it's pretty bulky. It's got 110 special defense, pretty nice defensive typing. It resists a lot of stuff. It has levitate too, and it's fast. It's 350 max speed. That's good. This is a Pokemon that has it all, really. And it was Ubers in previous generations. We can understand why. Some think it deserves to be Ubers in Gen 5. I mean, this is a Pokemon also that is so central in Gen 5. It's on almost every team, and yet it still sometimes feels like it's tough to deal with. Even with checks to it, you go in against especially defensive Jirachi, you're still getting chunked by Draco Meteor. With specs, it's still doing big damage. You can get tricked as well and just get totally disabled and punished. Latios is pretty ridiculous. Another amazing wall breaker in Gen 5 is Keldeo. With Hydro Pump, often in the rain, you can also kind of be completely ignorant to what's in front of you and just blow through even resistances. And special walls also kind of suck against Keldeo because of Secret Sword, a move that deals damage based on the enemy's defense stat. So Blissey and Chansey, the former go-to special walls, are just one-hit KO by this move every time, and because of that they're kind of unviable in Gen 5, or at least significantly less viable in Gen 5, mostly because of Keldeo's existence. So Keldeo is a special attacker that can kind of cheat and hit special walls really hard with Secret Sword. And finally, we have a respectable Pokemon to talk about, an honest Pokemon, Mamoswine. This is one of my favorite Pokemon of all time. I love this guy. With an Ice Ground Stab combination, you pose a big threat to the majority of the metagame. It's near perfect coverage. You also have access to Ice Shard for priority and Superpower for big neutral damage on the occasional Pokemon that can withstand this, like Rotom Wash, or, you know, more damage against Ferrothorn always helps. You can run a Choice Band on this to maximize damage. You can even just run like Never Melt Ice, which simply buffs Ice type attacks, or Life Orb if you like, and you'll still have a lot of breaking power just through the stab and high attack stat. I also like Mamoswine because I think it's way more balanced and reasonable and fun to play against and with than many of Gen 5's most explosive threats, because it's slow, and it's got frailty in the defense areas, and it's not impossible to outrun and threaten the guy or play around it. But it has its little advantages too. It's got ground typing, meaning it can come in against, you know, a Thunderous Therian. It can pivot on electric moves in general. It can come in also because of Thick Fat, which grants fire neutrality effectively. So one of the few ice types that can function defensively, also neutral to rock. I've got a dedicated video about Mamoswine and why it's so cool, if you want to watch that. Yeah, one of the coolest wall breakers and pretty popular among skilled players because it can maneuver in and pose a threat to just about everything. Dragonite received a buff in Gen 5 OU. They casually gave it one of the greatest abilities of all time, multi-scale, halving damage taken from any attack when you're at full HP, granting a safety net against incoming hits, allowing you to do more damage. And Choice Band Dragonite is still extremely powerful in Gen 5 OU. It still functions pretty similarly to how it did back in Gen 4, but it's even better because it has a better ability. Garchomp definitely deserves a shout out. It was Ubers back in Gen 4, legal in Gen 5 OU, and definitely a scary threat. I will say it's not quite as immediately powerful as fellows like Kyurem Black or even Dragonite, and it is a bit easier to stop it from just spamming Outrage. There's more counterplay against it. It's not fantastic into Ferrothorn if it does that. I think a better use of Garchomp is as a utility mixed attacker. That's my favorite set personally, with Stealth Rock. Start off the game with your hazards and Fire Blast to threaten Ferrothorn I like, and Skarmory, which I wouldn't really classify as a wall breaker in the same way, but you can just run Swords Dance Outrage and just click a button. Choice Banded Garchomp is not as common, but Choice Scarf Garchomp you do see because of its useful speed tier just above base 100, which lets you outrun important stuff. And finally, shout out to Breloom. Very good wall breaker in Gen 5. It is slow, but it packs a punch, and they gave this guy Technician in Gen 5 a significant offensive buff, same ability as Scizor, and it has plenty of tools to take advantage of it. Low Sweep being one of my favorite, which lowers enemy speed on hit, Mach Punch for a priority move boosted by it, and Bullet C, which can vary in its damage output, but even with the minimum of 2 hits, it's doing respectable damage right here. And superpower, just for a simple big stab move, you got high attack. Breloom is a fantastic breaker. You can bullet seed through resists. You can grass fighting is pretty complementary stab coverage. And you can also do, you know, life orb and swords dance on this. This used to be really powerful with gems back when those were allowed. That's ancient history now, but that was something. One of my favorite breakers in Gen 5 is Breloom. There was a lot of mechanical change in Generation 6, most notably the introduction of Mega Evolutions, which are some of the strongest wall breakers and strongest Pokemon in Gen 6. And when I think of a Mega Evolved wall breaker, I immediately think of Medicham, has one of the strongest Mega Evolutions. Mega Medicham still has the same ability as its prior form, but with much higher stats, most notably that 100 base attack, which of course gets doubled, including all of the extra stats. The speed is much higher too, and there are way better moves available now for Mega Medicham, most notably High Jump Kick, the 130 base power physical fighting type attack. Fake Out also helps. In Generation 6, Megas work a bit differently. On the first turn that you Mega Evolve, you actually have the same speed stat as your base form. You don't have the speed stat of your Mega form until the following turn. It's a weird mechanic, but Fake Out helps circumvent that a bit by flinching the enemy, granting you that free turn to gain that extra speed. Mega Metagross is another one of the strongest physical attacking Mega Evolutions, and this Pokemon is legal in Gen 6 but banned in Gen 7, which is interesting. I think a big reason for that is because of that speed mechanic. When Mega Metagross initially Mega Evolves, it will have the same speed stat as regular Metagross, which is significantly slower for that first turn, and then after that it will have the higher base 110 speed. But even considering that minor drawback, this is Metagross times 1 million. Tough Claws is an amazing ability that just grants a flat damage bonus to all physical moves. You already have 145 base attack. Meteor Mash still exists. This thing hits like an absolute truck. It is speedy after it gets past that first turn. It is bulky. It has it all, really. This is an outstanding wall breaker. Mega Pinsir is another extremely powerful Mega Evolved physical attack. It does have the drawback of being ×4 Rock Wake, which is a huge detriment, but it makes up for that with the sheer power of its attacks. It has the ability Aerolate, which is one of the best offensive abilities in the game. This converts all normal type attacks into flying type attacks and grants them a 1/3 damage bonus. So Return hits way harder. Quick Attack is now a flying type priority move with a respectable base power. Flying is a fantastic neutral attacking type, and close combat is great complementary coverage. Awesome wall breaker, one of my favorites to use. And you gotta give some respect to Crawdaunt, aka Mr. Craw, who got significantly buffed in Gen 6. Adaptability is a tool it gained in Gen 5, which grants 2 times stab bonus instead of 1.5 times, a significant increase in damage output. But in Gen 5, Crawdaunt did not have access to Aqua Jet yet, and Knockoff was also in its pre-buff state. In Gen 6, Knockoff became one of the best moves in the game moving forward. It had its power buff to 65. It has a 1.5 times damage boost if your foe is holding an item, aka 90% of the time, and then it removes the item. It combines extreme base power with utility, and with an adaptability boost on top of that, and a respectable attack set of 120, you can make up for your frailty and low speed with an absurd damage output on Crawdaunt. This guy hits like a truck, and there are no switch-ins to Crawdaunt. The mind game potential with Crawdaunt is also fantastic because you can bluff Aqua Jet and then hit them with actually a Crab Hammer or a Knockoff. Very little resists these two stab types, and if they do, often just hits them extremely hard anyway. This is maybe my favorite wall breaker ever, Crawdaunt. I love Crawdaunt. I think it's also, reasonably balanced. It's frail, easy to exploit, slow. It hits like nothing else. And I think it's better than UU. This is a respectable Pokemon in Gen 6 onwards. This is a real Pokemon. And finally, you've got Azumarill, who was used a little bit as a wall breaker in Gen 5, thanks to huge power and Aqua Jet, similar to Crawdaunt actually. It can achieve a very high attack stat thanks to huge power, which has the same effect as pure power, doubling attack. But now, Azumarill is significantly buffed with its complementary fairy typing. Fairy, a new type introduced in Gen 6. Not only it buffs the guy defensively, but grants it a new stab option, which is one of the best types in the game. In Gen 7, that Mega Evolution mechanic, where they have the base form speed first, and then they get the Mega Speed, was changed. Now they just have the Mega Speed. So Mega Evolutions were buffed in that way. And of course, a new generational mechanic was added to the game, Z moves, which greatly enhanced wall breakers, allowing them a one-time per game massive nuke. Obviously extremely useful, especially on Pokemon that have snowballing abilities. But The first Pokemon to talk about here is Ash Greninja. When I think of a Wallbreaker in Gen 7, this comes to mind immediately. If Greninja has the Battle Bond ability and it lands a KO, it will transform into Ash Greninja, which has much higher stats. Pull those up. 153 special attack casually, and it also gets a buffed Water Shuriken, which becomes 20 power and always hits 3 times. An amazing special attacking priority move. And with these stats, a choice specs, and of course, you know, Hydro Pump, Dark Pulse. Dark, one of the strongest attacking types in the game, especially after the nerf to Steel types in Gen 6, no longer resisting Dark. This is an absurd wall breaker. I think this Pokemon's a bit too strong. I'm not the biggest fan of it. At least it's a bit frail. It's exploitable in that way, but it just hits like a truck at his legendary tier stats almost, and really fast too. I mean, with a timid nature, you get up to 399. That is speedy as hell. Tapu Lele is another Pokemon I think of when I think Gen 7 wall breakers. This is one of the hardest hitting things in the game. Gen 7 also introduced the terrain mechanic with the Tapus. Psychic Surge being one of the best, granting extra psychic type damage, a 1.5 times boost, and immunity to priority moves, or priority moves have no effect at all from either side of the field on grounded Pokemon. And a Tapu Lele just jamming Psychic is yet another example of a completely ignorant Pokemon. It really doesn't matter if the enemy resists your move. I guess Dark types do have an immunity to Psychic, but you have the perfect complementary type for that, Fairy, which hits Dark type super effectively and is stab boosted. Psyshock, also great to threaten, you know, special walls like Blissey. This is one of the absolute scariest breakers that I've ever experienced in any metagame. Now, I don't know if this is a commonly held belief in the Gen 7 community. I'm not too up to date with the current metagame. I got no idea how Kartana survived not getting banned. This guy has 181 attack. That even beats Kyurem Black. This thing is absurd, and it's got good speed too. It's got 131 defense, a pretty solid typing. It does have the drawback of being extremely frail on the special side of things, but that's a small price to pay. This thing is a monster, and with a choice band, don't even talk about it. It's got great coverage. Knockoff, Smart Strike is really good. Sacred Sword, which ignores stat changes, that's great for breaking against defense boosters. And you can also run Z moves on this guy. One of the strongest ones was Normalium Z with Giga Impact, which has a massive base power, and with the Z-Stone, it doesn't require you to recharge. This was a great way to randomly KO a Zapdos. Zapdos is one of the most common switch-ins to Kartana, you know, resists its stab and has static chance and stuff. This doesn't make contact, and it can just one-hit KO Zapdos. And then you get the Beast Boost. I haven't even spoken about Beast Boost yet. When you get a KO, your attack raises even more. This is one of the stupidest Pokemon ever done. I don't know what they were thinking. They went too crazy with this. I guess it's funny in a way, but I'm glad that this no longer exists. I'll tell you that. This guy was too much. Blacephalon is yet another one of the Ultra Beasts that is an extremely powerful special attacker, one that can snowball out of control thanks to Beast Boost, enhancing its special attack further. 151 special attack is massive, with a choice specs and Shadow Ball, Ghost being one of the strongest attacking types. You can just bring this in the end game and little can be done about it. I don't think this Pokemon is as ridiculous as Kartana. It's at least rock weak, more frail defensively because of typing, and it can be checked by something like Blissey or Chansey, but this thing is an extremely powerful special attacking breaker. Now, I don't know if Magearna counts as a wall breaker, but it's one of those Pokemon that kind of just does everything, including wall break. It's a defensive Pokemon, a utility Pokemon, hazard setter, pivot, and a win condition, and an offensive threat, and a wall breaker. The thing about Magearna is it has Soul Heart, granting a special attack raise if you get a Pokemon to faint, and it has 1 million special attack and Shift Gear to raise speed. Alongside Z moves, you can very easily KO things and just go to the moon. You can also run choice specs on this, which was one of my favorite sets back in the day. This is yet another pretty stupid Pokemon. The best typing in the entire game, by the way. Steel Fairy, an incredible defensive combination, also good offensively with its stab options. In Gen 8 and 9, this guy's banned, rightly so, and I want to give a shout out to Victini, a bit more of a fringe one, not as popular or common as the others, but I found this to be one of my favorite breakers to use back when Gen 7 was current. V-Create is the ultimate wall breaking move. It has 180 base power, and the drawback of lowering defense, special defense, and speed. I loved using a Sun team with Torkoal, Victini, and you just get this guy in and nothing survives. This one hits like Toxapex, and I can't even remember if anything lives. The only thing is Heatran because it has fire immunity. You only have 100 base attack, but in the sun, with Choice Band Boost and the insane base power of this thing, I was a big fan of Victini. Bolt Strike is a nice option with high power to hit Heatrans coming in as well, and other such things, and U-Turn. This is one of my favorite Pokemon to use back at Gen 7. Now we're in Gen 8, and I know that the Pokemon on screen right now ended up getting banned. I'm aware, but I've got to mention it. I have to mention Dracovish, because this is the stupidest wall breaker ever designed, and I kind of love it. I think that my time using Dracovish was the most entertaining time of Gen 8, because this is the stupidest, most ridiculous thing of all time. Dracovish doesn't seem like much. It's got, you know, average stats, but it has this move right here, Vicious Rend, which has double power if you move before the target. So if you're faster, it becomes 170 power, and it's boosted by Strong Jaw for a 1.5 times boost. This thing could one-hit your entire life. There's 0 switch-ins except Water Absorb Pokemon. So the metagame was just centering around Dracovish and Water Absorb Pokemon. It was chaos. It was pure chaos. I've never seen a Pokemon thrust into viability out of the pure, overtuned nature of a single move. It was absolutely nuts. Now, I wasn't very well-versed in the Gen 8 metagame, probably the metagame I have least experience with, but I believe that the premier most popular wall breaker in the generation was Melmetal. I gotta be honest, folks, I gotta get it off my chest. I think that Melmetal is hideous. I hate the way that it looks. It's one of my least favorite visual designs in the whole franchise. That's unrelated though. Who asked, Jimothy? Who asked? As for its mechanical prowess, it has a high attack stat. It has the move Double Iron Bash, a multi-hit move that hits twice. 30% flinch chance on each, so with Stab on that, huge attack stat, and Iron Fist to even buff punch-based attacks. Is that a punch-based attack? I'm not sure actually. Whether it is or not, it's dealing big, and also flinching people so that they can't stop you and defeat you. Earthquake hits Toxapex, that's useful. Thunder Punch and Superpower is great coverage. Thunder Punch boost by Iron Fist, that's a good breaker, folks. That's a potent breaker, visual design aside. Now here's a visual design that is not hideous. Monkey with Big Drum, I can get behind this. Rillaboom, the new Grassy Terrain setter of Gen 8, with a massive attack stat and Grassy Surge to boost grass type attacks even further. Along with the signature move, Grassy Glide, 70 power, priority move that only works in grassy terrain. It's no surprise why this is so good. A Swords Dance set with the priority Grassy Glide and knockoff in Drain Punch for some healing was one of the more popular sets, but I believe you could simply just run a Choice Band on it too and just go in with Big Wood Hammer and U-Turn and Knockoff. These are all great, easy moves to click with little recourse in coming in. I will say that Terrain was nerfed in Gen 8 to only be 1.3 times damage boost, not 1.5 like it was in Gen 7, but it's still fantastic, still extremely good. Urshifu Rapid Strike is a Pokemon that was almost designed to be a wall breaker. With Unseen Fist, it can ignore enemy protection, meaning it can't be stalled with Protect like many of the Pokemon can. Very powerful ability for a wall breaker. Massive attack stat, close combat for huge base power. Surging Strikes as well is an always critting move, which ignores enemy defensive boosts, so it has anti-protect, anti-defense boosts. Aqua Jet also helps. Can't go wrong with pivoting. This is a damn good wall breaker. We also have Weavile here, and Weavile has existed in prior generations. It's been pretty solid in many of them, but feels like it was really a star of Gen 8. It became a really great fit in the metagame. It got the new option Triple Axle, a really nice multi-hit ice type attack that raises in power for each hit. Knockoff is extremely spammable. We love priority. This is a very frail Pokemon, but its high speed and damage output were a good fit back in the Gen 8 metagame. And a quick shout out to the GOAT, Tyranitar, who lost its most important option in Gen 8, Pursuit. And initially it fell down to UU for a bit in Gen 8. It was having some struggles for the first time in its life, but it returned back into the forefront of the metagame with a new adaptation, a Choice Band set. Playing to its new strengths, still Tyranitar, still has a massive attack stat, extra special defense in the sand. It's one of the best Dragapult switch-ins, and it can use that Dragapult switch-in as a opportunity for offense with Stone Edge, which hits like a truck. Heavy Slam is pretty nice. Got a high weight. It's Godzilla. You would imagine so. And Crunch, we've discussed how good Dark type is as an attacking type. This was one of the coolest metagame developments in Gen 8. Tyranitar returning as a Choice Band user. I always loved this. And finally, here we are in the current day of Gen 9 OU, and I'll be honest, in Gen 9 it might be easier to name the Pokemon that aren't wall breakers. Everything's a wall breaker now. Terastallization, perhaps the craziest mechanic ever introduced, allowing you to transform into a new type, and also gain stab damage on that new type That includes Pokemon that are already the same type as they terrestrialize into. You can just gain permanent extra damage on your stab attack. It was made for wall breaking. And of course, the number one wall breaker in the generation is King Gambit by default. It's the number one Pokemon by usage in the game and by viability ranking. This guy has 135 base attack, respectable defenses, respectable defensive typing, and the ability Supreme Overlord. And this is the real messed up part. For each fainted ally, you have 10% more power on your moves, and that can stack up. That can ignore effects like Unaware that would usually thwart offensive sweepers and wall breakers. King Gambit can gain damage that they can't ignore. With Kowtow Cleave, an all new powerful dark type stab option. Look at this set right here, one of the default Smogon sets. Black Glasses for more dark type damage, Terra Dark for more dark type damage, and select the move and then it's going to be alright. Sucker Punch as well for priority, high power priority. Some say they went too far with King Gambit. That might be controversial to some, but I might be in the same camp. I think that you can count Roaring Moon as a wall breaker as well, even though some might think of it as a traditional boost sweeper. The fact that the booster energy raises its attack stat, as well as acrobatics having a massive base power, and the damage from terrestrializing flying and the booster energy is not blockable by Unaware. This kind of is a wall breaker. It just overwhelms with incredible breaking power of acrobatics, and you can also just run a choice band on the guy, which can wall break with high power to knock off Outrage and U-turn. This also gets buffed in the Sun and is one of the strongest attackers you can use on Sun teams. This particular set is teched to gain speed instead of attack. You can gain attack if you want to though. Iron Valiant, one of the most prominent offensive Pokemon in Gen 9. Usually more of a late game cleaner, doesn't quite hit as hard as some of these other wall breakers, but one of the most popular sets in the early days of the generation was Choice Specs. And Choice Specs with Terra Fairy for extra Moonblast stab did hit extremely hard. Power through steel types that resist with the brute force of stab and Terra Fairy. Enamorus is another new Pokemon that is able to abuse the Stellar mechanic to become a pretty scary wall break. If you terrestrialize into the Stellar type and use Terra Blast becomes a Stellar type attack, which is neutral against everything but super effective against enemies that have terrestrialized. It also lowers your attack and special attack when used, but because Enamorus has Contrary, it raises attack and special attack instead. So you just have this incredibly powerful neutral attack that keeps snowballing and snowballing. You can just click that until the cows come home. Unaware Pokemon can counteract this by ignoring those boosts, but not every team can afford an Unaware Pokemon, and against a lot of common defensive cores, you can snowball past their defensive capabilities and break through. Choice Specs Kyurem is here, which is interesting because this is a Gen 5 Pokemon. Wasn't very popular in past gens, but that changed in Gen 8 when it received Freeze Dry as an option, which grants the ability to hit water types super effectively instead of being resisted by them. And that greatly enhances your coverage and the spam ability. Is that a word? Spam ability of this move. This was so powerful in Gen 8 that it had to be banned, Kyurem, and this was recently suspected in Gen 9 too, but it survived this time and it is free use. One of the better wall breakers. Massive special attack stat, great coverage too, access to Draco Meteor. And Sun teams, of course, enable more photosynthesis wall breakers than just Roaring Moon, Walking Wake and Gouging Fire being two of the most common, and they're quite straightforward. Hydro Steam is a fantastic move that is actually buffed in the Sun instead of being nerfed. Bit of a reversal of usual mechanics. And Gouging Fire is one of the best physical attacking fire types in this generation. Really difficult to switch in against when the sun is up. And there you have it, folks. I didn't talk about absolutely every single wall breaker you can use. There's a lot of fringe picks and maybe some I missed, but hopefully I covered all of the relevant ones and just showcased how in every generation wall breakers look a little bit different because of the mechanics. Every generation stands out in its own unique way and has its own identity, and wall breakers have to adapt around those systems. They feel a bit different from game to game. I think it's a cool aspect of playing competitive singles is all the variety that you can get from multiple generations. Who is your favorite wall breaker in Pokemon history, folks? Mine would have to be Crawdont. Thank you for watching.